Secretary General, thank you for inviting me once more. I spent a day with you in Brussels, and we had good exchange, and I was asked 2 weeks ago to be here, and I'm here. I promise I'll be here. And ministers and ACP stakeholders, protocol has already been observed. I am from South Africa. And as you all know, in my country, we had a long, long history of socio-economic and political dispensation, and in many of the ACP countries. And I sit here as a mining producer, the first black mining producer, not just the first black woman, but the first black mining producer in South Africa 29 years ago. And for the past 29 years, I've been producing minerals all over the world. Whether it's in Sudrun in Switzerland, if you've been in the underground railway tunnel in the world, the longest railway tunnel, those ventilation shafts were built by me. Joinville in France, whether it's the nuclear waste disposal shaft for the French government that wanted to start storing nuclear from water complexes underground, that shaft was built by my company. But the reason why I'm here is not to talk about the company, but just to share with you what pains me and what really frustrates me. Because for all the years that the ACP countries have been politically independent, our economic emancipation has not been reached. And mainly, we've always been producers of whatever minerals, whether it's agriculture goods, or whether it's minerals, petroleum, or mining minerals, commodities. We just, to date, are still producers. And we have not really created a beneficiation angle that will have industrialization after that. Because what's going to happen is that many of the countries are very endowed with mineral welfare. Should the time comes that those minerals are not there, we're going to have ghost countries with nothing to be, dependent on. Now, when we look at ACP, and we look at exactly what the issues are, and I want to go on the slide presentations that I've created. Just hold with me. I'm just trying to open this. Can you just help?
Yes.
And what I'm trying to say is that I've been looking at ACP and what companies have been doing to date. And the big thing is we need to have a further embarkment on regional and continental integration within the African, Caribbean, Pacific states. And what do I mean? If you look at the next slide, you'll find that for the years, these are the bilateral agreements. We've had lots of kinds of bilateral agreements, whether it's through African Union, whether it's through country by country, or whether it's agreements through the United Nations, or whatever agreements we have with the European Union. The fact remains is that we still remain countries that will continue exporting commodities, whether it's minerals or fuel or agriculture products. And I've got a few minutes. I'm not going to read everything. You're going to have presentation. You'll scan through it. And similarly, with the next slide, you're going to have the same from the Pacific to all the regions that you find yourselves in. Now, if you look at that slide, you find a lot of the countries that benefit from foreign direct investments are the European, the developed countries. And look at Africa and look at Pacific countries. It's very minute. And there's a disconnect. And there's not a fair balance of what we do. We continue supplying the goods, and there's continue getting direct investment. And what is it that we should be doing of course then, there's a real need for regional and continental integration. And the integration could be, it's also very unfortunate that many mining companies, so also ACP countries, continue to procure manufactured goods offshore instead of producing locally. And if you go further, you find that, why is it so? Because we're not locally beneficiating. And you'll see what the means for beneficiation is. It just means that locally producing whatever it is. If you're on agriculture, why don't you make the peanut butter and export it? If you're fishing, why don't you make canned fish and export? If you're going to make wines, why don't you do the wine and export? Don't just export the commodities without creating the car in the country, without creating the plane, without creating the ports and all that in the countries of ACP regions and economic blocks. Now, one of the reasons why we find ourselves lacking is the lack of legislation that is effective. And through my mining in different continents, in different countries, I find that especially within the ACP countries, mainly the countries that have minerals, the legislation doesn't benefit 100% us. Now, if you look at what we tried to do in South Africa, and I was very active and very instrumental in the design of the mining legislation when President Mandela became the president since 1994, we made it clear that we created a law that says the following: the minister may initiate or prescribe incentives to promote the beneficiation of minerals in the Republic. If the minister, acting on advice of the board, there's a ministerial advisory board that advises the minister, and after consultation with the Minister of Industry, finds that a particular mineral can be beneficiated economically in the Republic, that minister may promote such beneficiation subject to such terms and conditions as the minister may determine. Any person who intends to beneficiate any mineral mined in the Republic, outside the Republic, may only do so after written notice and consultation with the minister. ACP countries, any person who beneficiate any mineral or any goods and services outside an ACP country can do so with written consultation with that maybe unit, if we so wish to create a bilateral of some sort, that will then make sure that whatever good that goes out, if I'm an Anglo-American, if I'm a mining producer, if I'm a farmer, whatever I'm going to send as a raw product, before that person can create the end product, that person must first ask for permission in writing. Now, what that minister can do is say, wait a bit, why is it that you are creating the product somewhere else and not in the country? And you might, okay, before the creation of the product, you find that we also had different commodities, value chains for energy, for iron and steel, pigmentation and jewelry. You look at your country, you look at your continent, you look at the region and see how you can integrate on that. These kind of things should never have done in only India or China or other continents. Why can we not do it ourselves? We have so much platinum. Why is it that we have so much jewelry that is done also? And Antwerp, Israel, they don't have mines. But you find that there's a big center of cutting and sorting and beneficiation in those areas. And fuel cells. A lot of countries use the catalytic converters of platinum to put in the engine of their cars. Now, we don't want to go and copy what the others are doing. We can create fuel cells that's more carbon emission sensitive and more green revolution positive. And these fuel cells help with batteries. Instead of going for electricity through coal, we can use a fuel cell to do it from platinum and other fuel cell commodities. But what I want to say is that there are obviously barriers that impact. And finance ministers, you will know that one of the barriers that we're having is the barrier of transfer pricing. Why is it that to date, many countries cannot get access to money to just invest in road infrastructure, health, education, and any other country needs? Because there's an illicit outflow of capital. And why is there an illicit outflow of capital? Maybe because our laws in the country are not so conducive and strong to prohibit this. In South Africa, I was the first one to go to Parliament as the president of the Junior Mining Chamber. And we said, not under our watch. We are economic activists first. It's an economic revolution that we are fighting. It's not about profit. You can still make money. Profit is king. Yes, we make money. But that money must be done in a way that our countries and our economies and our continents are not going to be deprived of socio-economic, especially economic stability and economic enhancement. So we say to the Parliament of South Africa, your laws are a bit lacking. There's a lot of illicit outflow of capital. We have an organization at that time that has made a global financial integrity that spoke about 147 billion that was looted out of the country out of non-taxation payment in 2012. Then an Alternative Information Development Center spoke about another organization, also made a research, and just one company from 2003 to 2008 looted more than 300 billion. And then President Mbeki then took it further to the African Union, where the African Union, the heads of states decided to embark on this transfer pricing, looking at how they can address the transfer pricing. But can you imagine if all of you were supposed to be getting the taxation that you should be getting in your countries, Ministers of Finance, Ministers of Trade and Industry, and the other ministers and stakeholders that are here, what you could be doing with that money? Anyway, furthermore, if you look at also import parity, why is it that we in our continents, in ACP countries, we produce minerals cheaper, we sell it offshore, but then we have to import it again at international prices, but the product is ours. We have that iron ore problem in South Africa, where you produce iron ore, you sell it to the international market, you then have to import it back to yourself at more and expensive prices. So this regional integration between ACP states should look into those things and see how we can combat those things, especially now in America we have a president that is having his own America First approach, and you find that the AGOA contracts are now already being affected, and we need to look at alternatives. But now, how do we do it? There's importance for integration. Now, what we did, and I'll show you a little bit of the integrated resources development program that we did in South Africa. The mining producers came together, and the mining producers in one region, in Limpopo, there were about 28, just in a little region of a province, 28, and then we decided we wanted roads, we wanted clinics, we wanted that, but we couldn't do it alone. So what we did, we went to the executive mayor and the municipality, and we say, what are the roads? What is it that you're going to create in the terms of the housing and the whole road infrastructure and the dams and the water and electricity? Government brought in the money, we put in our own money, and together we then created a sustainable integrated approach. You'll go through those slides because we don't have time. I'm not going to go too much into everyone. But to go further, again, Section 26, in terms of the legislation, you can only continue, this section is so important, and I'm not saying have that section. All I'm saying is that look at your legislation, where there's trade and industry legislation, where there's development department, where there's finance legislation, and see how you can create a more meaningful enforcement so that companies can be abiding to those rules, foreign direct investors. But now, do we have special economic zones? Because when you talk to companies and you ask them, why is it that you're manufacturing offshore? The company will say to you, well, it's cheaper to do it offshore because China is cheaper, the cost of production is cheap, and in the end, I'm able to make a profit, and in the end, I still can, continue in business. Now, we are saying, how can we maybe create special economic zone beyond just a special economic zone within our countries? In South Africa, we have various special economic zones, but you find that it benefits us alone. And a special economic zone is a tax incentive haven, where you can, according to our Tax Act, if there's a Tax Act that allows us to give tax deductions when you manufacture. But when I look at the ACP countries, I would love to have seen a situation where the countries can say, okay, fine, where can we have maybe a committee that can look into common beneficiation? And that common beneficiation can go in par with some sort of a special economic zone, where then somewhere in the ACP countries where manufacturing is done, we can then collectively do it. For example, why is it that all the cars, the Mercedeses, are being manufactured or locally assembled in South Africa? Why is it that we don't allow ourselves to let maybe the seats be done in Ethiopia and maybe the nuts and bolts somewhere in the Caribbean? And maybe the body, maybe in South Africa to be done. So I'm just saying, unless we have that common integrated approach where we're going to put our heads together and plan in terms of what it is that we want to do as a unit, we will keep on going and asking for donations from others, and we will not be on our own. And I'm just saying that we need to have a paradigm shift. We cannot go as business as usual. It's now 2018. We are in the millennium era. We have managed to afford to conquer their political emancipation. But what are we doing in terms of the economic revolution? Okay, if you look at research, and you go, procurement is the leading force behind enterprise development, and you go further and you find that, just to make an example about one company, we made this procurement presidential forum. We did a research in 2008 of just 33 mining houses. And we realized that 33 mining houses supplied to 41,000 suppliers. But the procurement bill was $6 billion, just out of 33. We have many more than 33 mining houses, but we just did the 33. And then the actual procurement budget was $600 million US dollars. So I'm just saying that for HDSA, for the historical disadvantage, but total budget was $6 billion. So I'm just saying that there's a lot of money in terms of buying from yourselves, in terms of stimulating that integration among us and see who is producing what in which countries, and how can we embark on buying from ourselves rather than just buying from Asia and buying from other continents, and then keep on just being the supplier of goods and services rather than the beneficiaries of what we are supplying. Anyway, you read through that again, because I don't have a lot of time, but it also cannot help if you don't have roads infrastructure, whether it's from Cape to Cairo, whether it's from east and west, whatever it is, we need that kind of infrastructure. I had to come to Togo, and I find that it was a nightmare. Either I had to go via, I had to go through France or through another country and all that. We need to look at that integrated approach, and I know the African Union has that committee that's looking at it, and we would like to see dividends coming out. So all I'm saying is that we are now having to see how we're going to go from an exploited industry model to a sustainable industry model, where we're going to imagine the 21st century with the Afrocentric education, the state-of-the-art healthcare, where we want to have a movement of people and conversion of ideas that is so flow through in the way that we need to do. And of course, money. If you don't have money, you can't do a lot of things. But there is a lot of money out there. When I started 29 years ago, there were only laws that told me that because I'm black and because I'm woman, I can't go underground and I can't dig holes and I can't build mines. But there's money. If you look at all of your resources and reserves, and you look at what it is that the value is of those resources and reserves, already if you take that value, you put it in your balance sheet, there's already collateral in each and every country. Why do we not create a flow-through share stock exchange? Why do you not create a resources bank? So to just close, because this is not a sermon about me, it's a sermon about integration. This is just an input from me that says, can we have a paradigm shift? I don't want to be, my father died at 92, and this is 29 years that I've been in the industry. I don't want to be another 29 years in the industry, and I find that our politicians and we, the business sector, the private sector in the continents that we find ourselves, in the ACP countries, have not embarked in an economic revolution of some sort, where we're going to say enough is enough. The models that we have had so far has not been giving dividends, those dividends that are going to make us independent. And to the extent that ACP is there, to the extent that we can be part of whatever it is that you ministers and everybody here are going to be deciding, let us just have a paradigm shift. Let us integrate, let us be independent, let us beneficiate, let's do away with transfer pricing, let's do away with the illicit outflow of capital, let's make sure that we continue to conquer. And in the words of Nelson Mandela, he speaks about a long walk to freedom. We, the ACP States, having achieved political emancipation, we shall not tire on the road to economic emancipation. And you can read whatever Mandela was saying. He has climbed the deepest roads, and he went on top of the mountain. When he came to the vista of the last mountain, he realized there was still a long road, the walk has not ended, and for my long road, has not ended. So our economic emancipation drive and our economic emancipation lust and passion should not end. Thank you very much.